Hi everyone. So, do you remember what you were doing 10 years ago? I do remember. 10 years ago, I was in the SymfonyLive's offices in Paris, and I was working on the symfony-project.org, and we actually deployed the first version of the website 10 years ago today. Yeah. Woo! And today I'm here with you in Berlin with so many people. That's crazy, really. And 10 years ago, I was also trying to clean up what would become the Symfony code base, and this is the first committed subversion. Yeah. Scary code. And as you can see, we were compatible with Windows back then. We were trying to, at least. So Symfony is going to turn 10 in just 3 days. It's been an amazing journey, really, and a lot of work by me and by a lot of different people. And some stats, not from the last 10 years, but so that's just the last few weeks here. But during the last year, we merged 1,600 pull requests. That's 5 pull requests on average every single day, including weekends. That's a lot of work. Oh. And 240 pull requests just for Symfony 2.8. So Symfony 2.8 is going to be released at the end of November, and it has more than 100 new features, small and big. I'm not going to talk about that today. We are probably going to write some blog post about the major features in 2.8. There are a lot of changes, not necessarily new features, but if you have a look at the Symfony Standard Edition, for instance, you will see that aesthetic is out by default. The configurator is out. So new features is also about removing things. We have a new directory structure, we have a new installer, so that's great. And so 2.8 is now feature freeze. And as you can see during the last week, I've worked a little bit trying to merge as many pull requests as possible. So I think I've merged more than 100 pull requests in a week. I've also closed 100 tickets in a week, in a day actually. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about what we've been working on during the last year, and as you will understand, it has not been fun at all. So even if we were able to add a lot of new features, tweaking the framework here and there, we've also worked on being sure that upgrading from Symfony 2.3 to 2.8 and 3.0 is as painless as possible for you, and as painful as possible for us. So, as you know, I can tell you when 2.8 is going to be released, when 3.0 is going to be released, and the same goes for any version of Symfony in the future. That's because, I think we've been doing that for the last 2 or 3 years, we are releasing on fixed dates. So we know that we have a new version of Symfony at the end of May and at the end of November. It helps with predictability, and that's very important because Symfony is used by so many other open source projects, so they can actually plan their own releases based on what we are doing. And so we also try very hard to not break backward compatibility. And for that, so we have a quite long document on symfony.com/bc, and we explain exactly what backward compatibility means for Symfony, so what we can do, what we can't do. And just saying that we are following semantic versioning is not enough. Numbers, they do not mean anything really. It is just a convention. The artwork is really ensuring that whenever we want to add a new feature, whenever we want to fix a bug or fix something that doesn't work the right way, we are doing that in a backward compatible way, or at least that we can provide the old way of doing things alongside the new way of doing things. And sometimes that's not that easy. Okay, so everyone is familiar with semantic versioning? Yes? No? Okay, so that's a yes. Okay. So major version, we have version 2, minor version, 2.8, patch version, every month or so. We have new release with bug fixes. And of course that does not apply to non-stable versions of Symfony. So basically, anything that is public or protected should work the same way for all Symfony version in any given major version, any minor version of major version. We also have, and I think we introduced that before 2.0, add API tag. The tag is gone. We removed all the tag last week, I think. I think it was the wrong approach because the number of classes and methods tagged with at API was quite small anyway. It was not enough. So you were not able to only use the public API. So it was not that useful. So what we are doing now is that we are tagging some classes and some methods with the add internal tag instead. So anything tagged with add internal can be changed anytime, right? You might wonder why we are not, using private methods for methods, and sometimes that's not possible. In PHP 5.3, for instance, if you want to have a callback, it needs to be available in the same scope, right? So most of the methods that are tagged at internal are actually methods that are used as callbacks, mostly. Just a small example. Just renaming a class is a lot of work, right? So this is a small example. We have this flatten exception class, and we wanted to move it from HTTP kernel to debug. Not because we like to move things around, just because when we created this exception, the debug component did not exist, right? So it was in the HTTP kernel. But now that we have a debug component, it makes more sense for this class to be in the debug component instead of the HTTP kernel. So it is the new class, so it is in the debug component now, debug namespace. But of course, we need to keep backward compatibility. So for instance, here this is the exception controller in Symfony, and you can see that it takes an exception, and there is type int, flatten exception, right? As you can see, it comes from HTTP kernel. So how can we make that compatible? There is more dance that you need to do. So basically, the new one extends the old one, which means that if you are using the old one, it still works, and the type int is good. If you are using the new one, the typing is good as well, because we are extending the old one, and everything works as expected. That's backward compatibility. That's a very simple example. But it also means that at some point you have to upgrade from the old class to the new one in your code. So this one is probably not the best example because I think no one is using the pattern exception class in their own code. But it means that even if in 2.8 you can still use the old class, we encourage you to actually upgrade to the new class. Right? And if you are doing that, your code is going to be compatible with Symfony 3, basically. Right? Okay. So what is Symfony 3 really? So 3 is a major version, which means that we can break backward compatibility, but we won't. Right? So in Symfony 3, I think there are a couple of exceptions, but they are pretty minor. But we don't break backward compatibility in Symfony 3. If we break backward compatibility in 3, it means that we have a way to upgrade from 2 to 3. Right? Which means that if your code works in 2.8 without something I'm going to talk about later on, then you can upgrade to 3 without problems. Hopefully. Nobody ever tried, so we don't know. Okay, so it means that in Symfony 3 we do not have any new features. All new features are actually part of Symfony 2 something. Right? And that's why we're going to release at the end of November, for the first time, second time actually, 2 versions at the same time. 2.8 and 3.0. Right? So all features that we wanted to add in 3.0 are actually part of 2.8. Right? Which means that 3.0 is really, or 2.8 is the same code as 3.0 plus the backward compatibility layers. Or put another way, 3.0 is 2.8 minus the compatibility layers. The other big difference is that Symfony 3 is compatible with PHP 5.5, so we drop compatibility with 5.3 and 5.4. In Symfony, we also have what we call long-term support releases. So 2.3 was one of them. 2.7 is also a long-term support release. 3.0 won't be one of them. But so the goal is we have a new LTS every 2 years, which means that if you want to use something that is more stable, you can upgrade every 2 years. And we maintain LTS versions for 3 years, plus a year for security issues, so 4 years in total. But, so the next LTS is going to be 3.2, and yeah, that's kind of complex one, bear with me. So you have 2.3, and 2 years afterwards we have 2.7, so we add 2.7 in June. And you have a year to upgrade before we do not support 2.3, right? But as 2.7 was released in May and 3.0 in November, and 3.2 is going to be the next LTS, if you are waiting between 2.7 and 3.2, because we added some features in 2.8, you do not have enough time to actually upgrade, because 2.8 is going to be not maintained anymore when you upgrade to 3.2, right? Gosh, whatever. It means that 2.8 is also a long-term support release. Right, that's the conclusion. Yes, the conclusions. We also bumped, and it is still compatible with 5.3. It means that right now we are maintaining 4 different versions in parallel. 2.3, 2.7, 2.8, 3.0. Yes. Great errors, right? So the goal, the ultimate goal, is to provide a simple migration path from one version to the next one. From 2.3 to 2.4 to 2.5 to 2.6 to 2.7 to 8 and 3.0. So here's the process. Whenever we add a new feature, we upgrade changelog, we deprecate things, and whenever we deprecate something, we add the add deprecated tag with a comment about the new way of doing things. So we say this class is deprecated in Symfony 2.8, it will be removed in 3.0, and instead please use this other class. Right? And the biggest problem we had is that between 2.3 and 2.7, we deprecated a lot of things without doing that. And we started to do that a year ago during the SymfonyCon Madrid conference. So we started to add deprecation notices. So what we are using is we are using trigger error, right? Which means that whenever you encounter a deprecated method, behavior, feature, whatever, you have a warning in your logs. And so this is a number of pull requests, and this is SymfonyCon Madrid, right? And dozens of people were crazy adding all those deprecation notices everywhere in the code. Took me a lot of time to actually merge everything. But at some point, we realized that it was wrong. It was wrong because Symfony itself had so many notices, right? So Symfony itself was using things that were not, that were actually deprecated, right? When Ryan created this ticket, Symfony itself generated, just by running the unit test of Symfony, it generated more than 150,000 notices. And we had to fix those fast, right? So I closed this one, saying that's not the right way. We want those notices, but not by default. So now it's opt-in, right? So I'm going to explain that later on. It took us about 8 months to get it right, to understand how to make it simple for you, not overwhelming with all the notices everywhere. And I think we have something really solid now. So the first step, or the second step really, was to actually add a summary at the end of test. Right? We have a large test suite, with a lot of unit tests, and whenever the test ran on Travis, at the end of the test, we have a summary saying that there is something going wrong because Symfony itself uses something that is deprecated. So at first, it was not, it was just a summary, it had no consequences on the result of the test themselves, so that we were able to fix as many problems as possible. And then, when we were done, and it took us 4 or 5 months, and today, whenever Symfony is using a deprecation feature, that's a red flag. So the tests do not pass if we are using something that is deprecated. So we are sure that Symfony itself is free of deprecation notices. And then we updated Symfony itself, and we realized that there were a lot of things that were quite complex to deal with. I'm not going to talk about that because if I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to talk for hours, really. So I'm going to skip this one. But the thing is, right now, we have everything in place so that whenever we deprecate something, we add the tag, we add the trigger error, and we check, and Symfony itself is not using anything that is deprecated. So it's very solid now. And that's what we are going to do for all the newest version from day one, which means that whenever we're going to start working on 3.1 and we want to deprecate something, we're going to use this methodology. And actually, you can also use the same methodology for the code. I'm going to explain that later on. There is one small problem. Symfony itself has a large suite of tests, which means that it's kind of easy to spot all the classes, all the code using things that are deprecated. But what about your code? Do you have many unit tests? Yes, of course. Yes, sure. But the problem is that if you do not exercise some code, you won't have the notices because it's done at runtime. Right? So if you do not execute some code, you won't have the notices, and that's a problem. Right? So it would be better to have something that can detect the notices without running the code. And that's something this guy has been working on. I mean, SymfonyLive Germany in general, so he's not the only one, but he's the main guy behind the tool. They created a tool that can detect those deprecation notices, and he's going to talk about that now.
Yes. So, hi, I'm Chris. I'm working here in Berlin at SymfonyLive. And like Fabien just said, I'm gonna give you a quick ride to a tool so-called deprecation detector. The thing is, like Fabien said, you can only detect errors on runtime, trigger errors. And we wanted to detect the usage of deprecated classes, interfaces, and methods without running the code, without booting the application. So we were talking about static code analysis. And the code of Symfony provides the deprecated annotation or tag and triggers the error, like Fabien just said. And so I can skip that. The deprecation detector was developed by SymfonyLive Deutschland, with main credits to Martin Klemp, right at the bank there. So you get. So if you have any questions about it, ask him. It's shipped, and you can download it as a archive, just to your root directory of your Symfony application. And without running your application and having some special tweaks about the Symfony container and some other stuff, we are gonna parse your application code and print out violations. But actually it's not limited to Symfony projects. In fact, we started with just plain PHP files and classes, and then later on switched to Symfony projects and optimized for Symfony. For example, including the container dump to detect container service calls and match it with interfaces and classes. So the deprecation check itself has 3 parts. At first, it generates a rule set based on the library code you have in your project and based on the deprecation annotation. The second step is parsing the application code. That's a very complex part, as you can imagine. And the third part is the violation output. So outputting the violations so you can fix them, if there are any. If there are none, you're fine to go. The first part. By default, the deprecation detector takes the composer log file, but you can customize it with by the second argument and provide a library directory, or you can provide a pre-generated rule set. So maybe if your code is a Symfony 2.3 application and you want to check it against the rule set of 2.7, you're able to do that. The rule set, once it's generated out of, it's a collection of deprecated methods, interfaces, and classes. And once it's done, it's cached, serialized in a file. So you are able to recheck your application without regenerating your rule set. And you're even able to commit the rule set if you want to. The second part, parsing the source code. By default, it's a Symfony application, for example, we are parsing the source directory. But it's customizable as well by the first argument, so you can parse any directory you want. The parsing is much more complicated than the first part, because we have to detect the usages of classes, interfaces, and methods. And the next level is we have to detect is there a method definition of a deprecated interface or something like that. So let's have a look. You might recognize this code, maybe. And in version Symfony 3, the get request is not available anymore. So if you have a call in your controller to this function, the deprecation detector will find it. And this was actually a tricky one. It's about the set default options, which Fabien just mentioned. Actually, we have two deprecations right here. The method definition is not longer supported in Symfony 3, and the options resolver interface is deprecated as well. So for this just one line, you get 2 violations. The next part was quite tricky. I had the luck, I had nothing to do with it, the guys in Cologne just did it. You have to detect on the first side the type, and then you have the assignment to a variable, and then you have the call on this variable. In this case, it's the bind on the form, the request bind on the form, and it's deprecated as well, and we can detect it with the detector. Yes, that's a special thing. As I just said, we are able to resolve your container. And in this case, the security context service and the security context service interface with our service is deprecated. So we're able to detect this. And the next step is the combination. For example, the crypt method on the logger is deprecated as well. So that's the good part, but there's still some work to do. And we like to invite you to help us and to participate. So on Saturday, on the hack day, we're gonna share the code with you, and we're actually pretty looking forward to see how it performs in your projects. And so just come, register online or in the front desk, and I think it will be pretty interesting. The last part is outputting the violation. So we are putting out the type of violation. So it's maybe a deprecated method call. There's information about the file and the line number it occurs in, and the comment of the annotation. So it's, but I think the main time is a hint to resolve this deprecation problem. It looks a bit like that. when your terminal is white. But right now it's limited to console output. But there is already an issue in the repository to add more output formatters, for example HTML or JUnit or something like that. So that's the call. It's quite simple, I think. In the first row you see you can, if you download it to your Symfony application in the root directory, you can just execute that. I think you can even leave out the check. It's optional. But you can also add some options like verbose to have more input while the process is running, and like the cache directory or something else. And the first argument is the source directory, and the second one is the library. So, demo time. No, it's weird. Ah, okay. Oh, that's a Mac. And a French one. Thanks. So, good. So that's example of project. It's just a thing we did, and I added some deprecations, and now I'm going to execute it. I think the rule set is already generated because we tested it, but I will add some options. I hope, yeah. So you can have some output while it's pausing the application. Sometimes some files it stucks a bit because if your class or interface extends or implements some other class, it's static analysis. We have to find that class in your file system, and that's sometimes a bit hard to do. So if you have a look here, you can see, for example, the security context interface is used in a watchlist manager. Or the controller here uses the get request. And there's bind and is bound, and so we can really do it. We find that. But I think there is some work to do, and we were very happy if you participate, and I hope we see us on Saturday. All right, thanks.
Thank you. That's not me. Okay, anyway. So, this is the first step. That's not enough. That's not enough because Symfony is a full stack framework, but it's also a set of components. It's also a set of components, and in your project you can use HTTP kernel from version 2.4 with HTTP Foundation version 2.7, for instance. should work. So, it means that we need to be able to test all combinations. So, what we've done in the composer JSON file of all the Symfony components is that we want to be able to use a 2x component with some Symfony free dependencies and the other way around. Right. So for the next one, in 3.0, we can only use 2.8, right? Because we need all the features, so it won't work with 2.7 or earlier. And to be able to do that, in Composer, you say, okay, I depend on HTTP kernel 2, 3 or more, right? But then we released 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, and nowadays, whenever someone is Composer installed, nobody has the 2.3 version anymore, right? Everyone has 2.7. So, are you sure that your code is still compatible with 2.3? I'm sure it's not. How do you check that? It was not possible with Composer, so we added a feature on Composer. So Nicholas did that. So that now, what you can do is you can say, I want to update my dependencies, and I want the lowest stable version of my dependencies. So if you have 2.3, it's going to use the latest stable version of 2.3, so 2.3.28, whatever we have nowadays. And that's what we are doing on Travis. On Travis, we are testing with the latest version, with 3.0 for 2x and 2.8 for 3.0, and also with the lowest version. And we actually updated a bunch of dependencies because what we had in our Composer JSON files were not up to date anymore. So I encourage you to do that, not for your project, but if you have some open source project, do that. You can have a look at the travis.yaml file. The Symfony one is quite complex, but you can have a look at the Silex one or the Twig one. We are using the same trick. Okay, we still have some problems because in 3.0 we removed some code, and this code was tested in version 2x. So when you mix and match versions, you have some problems. Some tests can't be run anymore, right? So we needed a way to actually spot the test where we were testing the legacy version of a feature. So if you have a look at the Symfony code, we have a group legacy. And this group is only about testing the legacy version of the legacy features of Symfony. Okay, I'm going to go faster than that. Now that Symfony works well with all the versions, what about the ecosystem? So for instance, Symfony has some support for Doctrine. But if Doctrine says that it can only use the console of version 2x, how can we use Doctrine with Symfony 3.0? That won't work. Composer won't install anything. So the next step was to actually submit pull request to add Symfony 3 to all the dependencies we are using in Symfony. But we wanted to provide also a simple way for them to do that. So a simple way for them to get the duplication notices so that they can fix their code so that the code is actually compatible with 3.0. So we created a new component, PHP unit bridge. Using it is really simple, and everyone can use that. So this is an example from Twig and Silex. So in required dev, we add PHP unit bridge. And what it does is it registers some listeners in PHP unit so that whenever you have deprecation notices, you have a summary like in Symfony, and a bunch of other nice things so that you're sure that you're not doing anything deprecated anymore. Okay, so that's quite complex, right? We need to have compatibility between all 2x version plus 3.0, but this is really the simple part. We have more than that. Symfony right now is compatible with PHP 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, and 7, plus HHVM. It works with Linux and Windows. Now we have the equivalent of Travis for Windows, so we are sure that TB is actually compatible with Windows. But there's more than that, because Symfony is also compatible with 3.1x or 2x, and other versions of Symfony. I need to rest a bit. And we are testing all the combinations. And the best project to do that is actually Silex. So Silex is a macro framework on top of Symfony components, and Silex uses all the Symfony components, or most of them. And this is a run on Travis for Silex 1.3. So Silex 1.3 is compatible with all versions of Symfony from 2.3 to 3.0, compatible with 3.1 and 3.2. And if the Silex test passes, we know that we are in good shape. So as you can see, we have all the PHP versions, tweak versions, dependencies, 2.3, 2.8, 3, HHVM, PHP 7. That's great. We are not done yet. We are almost there, but now it's your turn. Yes, you have to work as well. So if you are a contributor to a bundle, a Symfony bundle, or if you have a PHP library using Symfony, please add 3.0 to your library. Test that you do not have any deprecation notices. Do the fixes. And that's how we can have a successful Symfony 3. Because obviously, if you can't install any bundles with Symfony 3, it's kind of useless, right? So, and I can't do that, and we, as the Symfony core team, can't do that for the thousands of bundles out there, and all the libraries and all the PHP codes using Symfony everywhere in the world. Okay, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope I will see you in Paris in 2 months. We're going to have a SymfonyCon in Paris. It's going to be a big one. I think we are going to have more than 1,000 attendees there. And the venue is amazing, really. And we will probably have a big cake. And some other nice things I won't talk about now. Thank you very much. Do we have time for some questions, if any? So if you have any questions? No.
So how much code did you actually remove from Symfony 3.0?
Oh, that's a very good question. So the question is about how many lines of code we removed. I did. I checked that. I don't remember. But I think it's 20,000 or more than that. It's a lot, really. But then I don't have. I don't know how many lines of code from pure code versus tests. So, but we removed a bunch of code, really. Yeah. And if you have a look at the Finder, for instance, I think we removed 80% of the code. Yeah. Which means that your code is probably going to run faster on 3.0 than it is running on 2.8. You know, less code in PHP means faster. Oh, I think I have. Let me have a look at that. If there's any other questions, I'm just looking for something in the meantime. Yeah. That's very true. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks again, and I hope you're going to enjoy the conference.